Why do I love Chainsaw Man so damn much? There are so many aspects in this show that I normally hate in anime, and that would sometimes cause me to drop an anime so fast. Makima is an unbelievably unlikable character. She reminds me way too much of Nagatoro, except to Nagatoro's defense, she actually cares for Naoto, albeit showing it really horribly at times in my opinion. But Makima doesn't care about Denji at all, and she's an adult woman, whereas Nagatoro is a teenage girl. So logically, you would think that I would have even more problems with her than I would with Nagatoro, and I've had many issues with Nagatoro as well. More about that in the future on this channel, I promise. Wait until January. But anyways, the big reason I'm fine with it here is because of consent. Say what you want about Nagatoro, the good intention she has, but it still doesn't change the fact that she does make Naoto extremely uncomfortable a lot, and it is her fault, whether it's her intentions or not, and it's definitely not consensual. With Makima and Denji, yes, she doesn't care about him, but it's still 100% consensual. Denji wants to touch her breasts, and while she's using him, he's likely at least partially aware of this, and is fully accepting of it. There's a level of understanding between the two, and despite her flaws, Makima does in fact let Denji touch her boobs, albeit through her clothing instead of underneath, pretty early on when Denji is unsatisfied with powers. The flip side is that Denji's mentality definitely isn't healthy. I think you could make many convincing arguments that he suffers from mental illness, the biggest being depression, and that Makima is simply taking advantage of that for her own personal benefits, and that Denji is just letting her do so, which will only inevitably do further harm to his own mental state. I guess the moral is that I personally value consent over good mental health. Don't know what that says about me exactly, but that's just how I honestly feel about it. But yeah, Makima is phenomenally unlikable. I can't stand her personality, and the fact that most people loves her kind of disturbs me, but whatever, like, whoever you want, I suppose. I also want to clarify that this is one of those series that's been difficult to not hate entirely because of the fandom. Specifically the Western fandom. I don't know what Japanese fans have been saying about it because I can't read Japanese. The concept is that Denji wants to touch boobs, and that's all he cares about. And he's seemingly willing to sacrifice anything to do so, even his own mental health and freedom. That as a concept is fine, even kind of genuinely humorous at times. But in the online fandom, I've heard countless things like Denji is the most realistic male anime protagonist, insinuating that all men are like this. And if you think I'm jumping to conclusions, I've confirmed this with many people posting these memes. Bottom of the line, this fandom sucks just like about every other fandom out there, but I've been trying my hardest not to allow that to affect my judgment of the series itself. The worst part is that many of these comments aren't just by women, but are by other men as well, who are clearly projecting their own insecurities and flaws on the rest of us. But anyways, I do feel like Denji is realistic to certain men indeed, especially teenage boys, and Denji is indeed 17 at the start of the series. The way I see it, he's clearly suffering from deep-seated depression and insecurities, which he's masking with his goal of wanting to touch boobs before he dies. Whether or not these themes will come to a head before the series ends, I don't know, but I hope they do. However, these insecurities have caused him not only to set out on a goal to touch boobs, but also to literally become the dog of Makima, who's probably the main girl of the series, at least so far. I want to clarify that there's nothing wrong with people desiring to be the bottom, so to speak, in a relationship. Everybody has fetishes, obviously, and as long as those fetishes aren't inherently damaging to the mental and or physical health of the person, then they shouldn't be shamed for them. However, normally fetishes like this are healthy only if they are present in the bedroom. If they translate into real life, in my personal, not professional, I have to stress, opinion, then they should be with a limited capacity, such as one partner making more money than the other, or being the breadwinner of the household, stuff like that. The dominant partner should still genuinely respect the submissive partner. That's where this agreement starts to be unhealthy, because Makima doesn't respect Denji in the slightest. She's using him to fulfill her own personal goals, and to that end, she is sometimes willing to give him rewards that he would be pleased with, such as allowing him to touch her boobs, albeit through her clothes and not directly, when he's disappointed with Power's boobs. I do think that she would probably be willing to let him touch her boobs directly. Who knows if she'd let him use her entire body if he requested it as a reward. I guess we'll just have to wait and see to find out. And like I said, Makima doesn't respect Denji, and he knows this, and doesn't seem to care. This makes it clear that the fetish in their relationship goes beyond sexual gratification or real life stuff like Makima being the superior in the household. He's fine with the situation because he doesn't respect himself. He's consumed by depression and self-hatred, which he masks with his mission to touch boobs, and which also is common with a lot of teenage boys, but I feel like this series takes it to the extreme for the purpose of the themes of the story. That's not to say that this isn't a natural desire for a teenage boy, or hell, for any straight man. It absolutely is. But it's the extreme extent that he goes to that makes it unhealthy. I also relate to Denji to a certain extent. I'm a 28-year-old male virgin. I would absolutely love to be able to touch boobs, or perhaps even go further than that. But the difference is that I wouldn't sacrifice my freedom and self-respect for that prospect of maybe getting to someday, because I do have some level of self-respect, even if it's sometimes relatively small. However, what makes Denji more relatable is that I could imagine an alternate timeline where I am as bad as him. I said earlier that the fandom oversimplifies the character conflict in this series by simply saying that this motivation is realistic because he's a man. I'm not saying that this is unrealistic, but rather many don't seem to understand the depth of flaws of a man who is like this is suffering from, whether he realizes he's suffering or not. That's one of the biggest things that makes this anime engaging, because while I'll admit that I'm invested in him touching boobs, and perhaps even getting to go further than that, I'm even more invested in him realizing the emptiness of that this alone would inevitably bring him, and growing as a character, while of course enjoying the show's brand of dark humor along the way. Denji's first meeting with Makima definitely wasn't what I was expecting. I honestly don't know what I was expecting, because I knew going in that they were both devil hunters and that he had a chainsaw for a head, but definitely not this. It happens immediately after the first time he turns into Chainsaw Man, which by the way was a spectacular scene filled with blood and adrenaline, and it's nowhere close to the last either. Makima arrives to see all of the dead devils, and he collapses, her catching him. Before he passes out, she offers him two options: to be killed like a devil, or for her to keep him. If he chooses the latter, he'll have a roof over his head and be fed every day. Of course, you probably know he chooses the latter, even if you haven't seen or read it yet. Now, the choices he's given mean a lot more if you're familiar with his life beforehand. He's almost completely broke, and has to pay off some kind of debt that isn't fully explained. Basically, he lives paycheck to paycheck, and is always on the edge of being murdered and having his body parts sold off in order to pay for this mysterious debt. This helps us emphasize with him, and considering how extreme his situation is, it does make it more understandable why he would be willing to give Makima such control over him. Although he did slightly express the desires earlier on in this episode, so this can't be the only reason why. But nevertheless, he does help it does help us feel closer to him and perhaps make us think that if we were in the same situation as him, we might actually be willing to go to the same extremes as him. Minus the fact that this is his fetish and he clearly gets off to it. Even if that wasn't the case, he's still in a dire situation and needs money desperately. Episode 2 further elaborates on his mentality and kind of helps prove a point I made earlier that this series isn't justifying his fixation on being Makima's dog in exchange for touching her boobs, but is instead comedically pointing out that this is actually unhealthy. At the start of the episode, they're riding together in a car. Makima tells Denji that he's in her care, that he'll be working for her, and then goes on to say whenever Denji responds to her, he should respond with yes or woof, as she doesn't need a disobedient dog. Even going as far as to say that dogs who don't obey their masters are put down. This calls us back to episode 1, which he told him that he had 2 choices, to come work for her or to be killed as a devil. Now, I know Makima's true nature beforehand, before watching Chainsaw Man, but to anybody else, while she was maybe a bit suspicious beforehand, this was actually the first time when the viewers would get to see how she actually is, even if ever so slightly. Denji has a moment when he starts to regret going with her, acting kind of offended that he's being treated as a dog. However, later in the episode, she treats him to a tasty meal, which could kind of be considered their first date. And he decides that this is the first time anybody, especially an attractive woman, has been nice to him. So he decides to happily accept this new life of his. He becomes a man that has no issues being treated like a dog, so long as he can be close to Makima. Later on in the same episode, after his most recent kill with his new partner, he stares out his window and laments that while he gets to eat tasty food every day, has a good roof over his head, and can be near a hot woman all the time, something seems to be missing in his heart. But moments later, he curls up into a ball and sorrowfully says that he wants to touch Makima's boobs. I interpret this as him almost realizing how unhealthy that this arrangement is, but his mind denying it, and him justifying to himself that the reason he feels this way is because he hasn't been able to touch boobs yet. A dream he gave up on a long time ago, but now he has a great pair staring at him every day. His mind rejected the real reason why he was feeling empty inside and instead reverted back to the primal false explanation, as it's more comforting than admitting to himself that he's a broken man who needs serious help. But let's move on to Best Girl, or at least Best Girl so far, Power. She was introduced in episode 2 as Denji's second partner in the devil hunting business. Denji doesn't like her, but we've already discussed that he's a broken man anyways, and he might have no taste as well. I love tomboys and I love dominant women, believe it or not. However, the best thing about Power so far is how she switches from being badass to being adorable. At the end of episode 2, she goes completely nuts and annihilates a devil in broad daylight. During this scene, which is almost as entertaining as the episode 1 scene when Denji kills a bunch of devils, it could understandably lead you to believe that she's an unsympathetic, unemotional monster. However, at the beginning of episode 3, Makima shows up and chastises her for doing such a thing so publicly without permission. And while Power initially attempts to blame Denji, claiming that he ordered her to do it, when Makima gets serious about scolding her, she suddenly becomes timid and withdrawn. It's hard to tell if that was real or just an act, but either way, it's adorable and adds to her depth a bit. And what adds to that is the very next scene, when she tells Denji that she hates humans because of her natural instinct as a fiend, and she hates devils because a pet cat of hers was murdered by one. Then, of course, it's capped off by humor because Denji says he'll do anything to grow breasts, and then Power says that he can touch hers if he hunts down the devil that killed her cat, and he doesn't hesitate to accept that amazing offer. Which, to be fair, if it was Power offering it, I probably would too, even if I wasn't as broken as Denji, which I like to think that I'm not, but anyways. They go on a mission together. As they travel to the location, Denji tells Power that he can transform into a bunch of chainsaws, but she doesn't seem to believe him. Once they arrive, Power appears to betray Denji by knocking him out. Denji suspected as much and tries to attack her first, but he's too slow. She offers him up to the demon in exchange for Meowie being returned to her. This is also where we learn that she did in fact believe him about his abilities and figured that he wouldn't die. However, the demon didn't like Denji's blood and wanted to punish her, so he ate the cat right in front of her. That's when we get a flashback to when Power first met Meowie. She found the cat after she defeated some nameless demons. This must have been before Makima took her in, as she's completely naked and incredibly disheveled. At first, she intended to give the weak cat food so it got fat and healthy before she eats it. However, she quickly began to genuinely enjoy the company of Meowie over time, until one day when the Blood Devil confronts her and takes the cat, telling her that he needs blood and to bring a human if she wants the cat back. And then, back to the present day, the Blood Devil eats Power. Although that doesn't last long, as Denji chases after the Blood Devil, turns into a chainsaw, and after a surprisingly meaningful speech from him, he kills it and saves her. These episodes do a great deal to endear me to Power. Of course, I liked her upon her introduction because she's a tomboy. Yeah, that's basically it, and also attractive as well. But I mean, to further make me fall in love with her. At the beginning of the episode 4, sometime after Meowie is taken from her, she's running along the street crying. She questions herself why she's searching for a human and wonders if it's to save the pet cat. But this goes directly against her instincts as a fiend, which are supposed to value self-preservation above all, not to mention her natural hatred of humans, and her natural desire to consume all other life forms that are smaller and weaker than her. It honestly baffles me why Makima is so damn popular in the fandom, because Power is vastly superior if you ask me. And from what I've heard, Power gets even better, and Makima absolutely doesn't. And that's not just in the fandom either, but in the series itself. Not just Denji, but there's signs that even Hayakawa, who seems to be Makima's most trusted and closest ally, is also infatuated with her. In the scene when Makima tells him over the phone that she trusts nobody as much as him, and he blushes at this. That's not to say Power is flawless. Of course, there's her inner struggles with being a fiend, while also developing emotions for humans and other living creatures, which goes against her very nature, that I mentioned in the previous paragraph. And in addition to that, she does laugh at Kobeni's suffering when she learns about it, which did sour me a bit to her, but surprisingly not enough it didn't make me hate her. I love tomboys in general, and if I like a tomboy character, or hell, any character for that matter, but tomboys even more so, from their introduction, then it takes a lot for my feelings on said character to change so drastically. But yeah, that definitely wasn't cool. Another more minor flaw is that she also pats her chest. That's only a flaw because you should definitely be proud of what you got. However, it's an even bigger flaw for Denji because it made him extremely disappointed with her breasts once he gets to grope them. It's actually kind of ironic because he said admirable stuff in this series, like groping is better when you have consent, which is surprisingly mature for someone like him, but then he's disappointed with Power's boobs that aren't as big as he originally thought. Even though, in my opinion, a real man appreciates all boobs, regardless of their size. At least that's what I was originally going to say, but upon further inspection, I think even this feeds into his character. Not long after the bathroom groping scene, he has a chat with Makima. She can tell that he's not his same usual self. He tells her that he was chasing after something, and he finally received it, but then it wasn't as special as he expected. He further inquires if he was to go after something else and acquire it, he might have just been happier during the chase. This moment, which happens in episode 5, is similar to a few episodes prior when he's in his house, looking out on the street, lamenting that while he gets to eat tasty food every day, he has a good roof over his head, and he can be near a hot woman all the time, something seems to be missing in his heart. But moments later, he curls up into a ball and sorrowfully says that he wants to touch Makima's boobs. In this case, his mind is trying to understand why he doesn't feel as enthused as he expected upon touching Power's boobs. The real reason is obviously because most people need more than just sexual gratification to be truly fulfilled in their life. The crappy part is that it's possible for us to be unfulfilled without even realizing it, especially if we're tremendously depressed. His mind is tricked once again when Makima finally allows him to touch her boobs. This not only further deludes his mind into believing that this is what he truly wants and needs, but it also further goes to show us, despite her flaws and unlikability, how incredibly skilled that Makima is at manipulating people, especially broken people like Denji. With that being said, let's get to Kobeni. I said before that it's sometimes tough for me to decide who I think is best girl in the series, Power or Kobeni, and that's because I love them both a lot. Two girls that are more likable than Makima. And yet Makima is more popular. I don't understand you people sometimes. But anyways, I love Kobeni because of how tragic her story is. The saddest part is that once again in the fandom, where people have been claiming that she's as useless as Sakura Haruno from Naruto. You've got to be shitting me, right? At least Kobeni has a good reason for acting the way she does. We learn that she has a younger brother, and that their parents want him to go to college because they have higher hopes for him than for her. To this end, they forced her to get a job so that she could send him to college, which left her with two options: become a devil hunter or a prostitute. Man, great choices she has there, huh? She's obviously not cut out to be a devil hunter, as she's very cowardly, and understandably so if you ask me. Not everyone can be brave whilst facing such monsters, and clearly, even within this fantasy universe, that statement remains true. But what's her alternative? Being a prostitute? I'm not a guy that has anything against prostitutes, but it's also obviously not a job that would be for everybody. From what I can tell, for a person like her, that was basically like choosing the lesser of two evils, or what she believed to be the lesser of two evils anyways. She struggled with choosing between two really shitty options, while also deep down inside wanting to go to college as well, but her parents not letting her. And to my knowledge, it's customary in Japan for children to be raised to obey their parents eternally, even into adulthood. I find her internal struggles to be extremely engaging and tragic. At this point, she breaks down into tears, and to be fair, this isn't exactly the best thing to do, as both Power, as well as another girl in the scene who seems to be more sympathetic to Kobeni, tells her devils love fear, and succumbing to fear could make them easier to kill. Essentially, this act could potentially make her declaration that they're going to die here a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I can't help but love her. Power's reaction is a bit irritating, but overall doesn't make me hate her, and the fandom's reaction, calling her similar to Sakura Haruno from Naruto, is bafflingly wrong. At least so far. Sakura was a character who had potential in terms of both personality and abilities, but was utterly wasted, likely because author Masashi Miyamoto completely forgot about her. and he literally stated that before, so that's not conjecture. Kobeni is cowardly, yes, but she's tragic, and this author is clearly putting more effort into her characterization than Kishimoto put to Sakura's. Chainsaw Man is a fascinating series. It's honestly an anomaly. It has a lot of unique traits in terms of not only world building, but also what's more relevant to this video, characterization. Many of the characters resemble ones I've seen before, but there are deviations that helps keep them fresh, and even then, I've never seen these types of characters in a shonen manga before. It actually harkens back to Death Note. No lie, I think Chainsaw Man has the potential to be the next Death Note in terms of intrigue, originality, and maturity and character complexity that we don't normally see in shonen manga. I have to say, the hype before the series came out was probably almost equivalent to Death Note back in 2008. But that might be mainly because this manga has been ongoing for many years and ended before the anime even began, so it had a lot more time to build up a devoted and often rather vicious fan base. And even with the elements I don't like, I feel like it's intentional on the author side of things. Of course, I have to come back to Makima's character for this point. I hate her. She is the absolute worst kind of person who manipulates people, taking advantage of their insecurity and doing it with a warm smile, effortlessly convincing them that she's a kind-hearted individual. But I believe that's the whole point. Even though much of the fandom seems to like her for some reason, I don't think she's meant to be likable, at least to a normal functioning individual not drowning in depression and self-hatred like our boy Denji. However, she's also good at what she does. If I went into the series not knowing anything about her, I might have even trusted her, at least a little bit, from the beginning. But if I were in this situation, I would have dipped out the moment she implied I was her property, her pet. But again, I believe this is entirely intentional, so it's probably fine from a writing standpoint. And that does it for me. In the comment section down below, let me know your thoughts on Chainsaw Man, the anime and the manga, and my video, and the opinions I stated. Do you agree or disagree with any of them? Do you think I'm overthinking this series, or do you think that I'm spot on in terms of my analysis of the themes and characters of the series? I will say I do tend to overthink things a lot, not just in anime and manga, but in the movies and TV shows I watch, and the music I listen to. That's just kind of how my brain is wired, which is one of the reasons I started this channel to begin with, because I love anime and I love analyzing anime. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to press the like button, subscribe to my channel for more content in the future, hit the notification bell if you want to know whenever I release new videos. I've been trying to upload 1 or 2 videos per week, but my schedule isn't as consistent as I'd like. Comment on the video down below, and share this video on platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, and etc. if you think it deserves it, to try and get it and my channel more attention. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.